Hey everyone, it's Steph from Stephanie Stone Cosplay, and today I'm here with a cosplay breakdown with how I made my Tifa Lockhart cosplay from the Final Fantasy VII Remake. To run down all the different topics that I'm going to be going over in order, we have the wig, contacts, her earring, the black top she wears underneath her white top, her arm sleeves, her bracer, her gloves, the glove armor, the chain bracelets she wears and the little charms on them, the metal bangle that she wears in addition to them, the materia band, the materia itself, her suspenders and shoulder pads getup, the skirt, I will briefly mention the shorts and the socks, and we will also talk about her shoes. I will be providing timestamps for all of these topics in the description as well in case you want to hop around to something specifically, and with that, let's get started. So first things first, the wig that I used for my Tifa Remake cosplay is from Cosplay Buzz. I will have a link in the description down below. It took a little bit of styling because the way that lace front wigs are styled is that the hair tends to flip back. I used some got-to-be glued hairspray, a blow dryer on high heat, as well as a flat iron to fight the hair a little bit so that it would lay a little bit more naturally on her face. And I also trimmed up her bangs. Something that I wound up doing later that I kind of wish I did before was that I also tackled her hair with the mane and tail detangler spray and a flat iron. So I would highly recommend, if you do get this wig, to flat iron the hair with mane and tail so that it behaves a little bit more nicely and it doesn't have as much crazy volume. Next up, the contacts for Tifa. The contacts that I wound up getting from Tifa I got from the website Pinky Paradise. The style is called Princess Pinky Cloudy Red, which I also thought was super cute. They're also the ones that I'm wearing right now so that you can kind of see how it looks like on video, but the reason why I chose these contacts is because these contacts are clearly not super brightly red, which is really good because I feel like Tifa has a very subtle sort of reddish tint to her eyes that sometimes borders on brown, so I feel like these worked out pretty well. I am also affiliated with Pinky Paradise, so if you do happen to get these same contacts, you can use my code STEPHSTONECOS to get a mystery gift, whatever it may be. Next up is Tifa's earring. Mine looks like this. It's a little bit cannibalized, I believe, from an old earring, but it's a post with a couple rings, and then it has this teardrop. This teardrop I believe I got from another necklace on Amazon, and it came on a longer chain, but I took it out and sort of Frankenstein these together. Her earring actually doesn't look like this. I will have an image here to show you what it looks like, but it looks like the stud has some sort of pearl, and then around it seems to have some sort of swirling gold that wraps around it, along with what I assumed were diamonds, but they could also be some type of silver. I'll have a link down below for this type of post earring that I think looks close to it. And then dangling from the post are 3 chain links, and then it seems to have some sort of white bead, or maybe it's another pearl, and then another 3 links till it reaches the top of the teardrop. I located a teardrop that might work, and an important thing to note as well is that Tifa only wears an earring on one of her ears, similar to Cloud's Strife. She does not wear an earring on her other ear. This is also something that was confirmed in Advent Children when you see her passed out in Cloud's lap and you get a glimpse at her other ear. Moving on to stuff I constructed, we will now be talking about her black compression top that she wears underneath her white top. So this is how mine turned out right here. It has a band along the bottom. The fabric that I used for this was something that was left over, I believe, when I made my Aqua cosplay. So I don't know exactly what type it is, but if I remember correctly, it is some type of performance stretch knit that I got from Joanne Fabrics. Other than that, it isn't too complicated as far as the piece goes. So next up, we will be talking about her white top that goes over it, and here is mine again. So this top I made a little bit differently, and it had a handful of specific details on this one. So first off, I made sure to get a rib knit fabric that I felt matched her photo as closely as I could. So this is how the rib knit looks up close on my fabric, and if you look in the picture, you can also sort of see the edge of her top and how it looks like it's a rolled hem, so I made sure to do that as well along the edges of her shirt right here. So I have that all along the arms and the neck, and then at the bottom, because it did seem to have some sort of a special elasticity, I did include an elastic band at the bottom here of this top. So it does look a little bit wrinkled when it's not worn, but obviously it is tailored to my body so that when I do put it on, there is no wrinkles or anything like that. Next up are her arm sleeves. So if you're a stickler for detail like me, if you zoom in super duper close in her arm sleeve, you can see that the fabric lines are horizontal, which is interesting. So I made sure to integrate that in my arm sleeves. So these are how mine turned out. They do have a bit of a taper to them, so you can see to make sure that they are quite tight along my arms. And then I just folded the top It is just a tube so that I could reduce bulk on my hands when I was wearing her gloves, but these guys are pretty simple. Next up is her bracer, which was done by my partner, Lawrence Iwood, so we will cut to him so that he can explain how he went about the design process.
Hey guys, this is Lawrence. So I did the gauntlet piece, which you guys see here. So I'm gonna start from top to bottom, so let's start with this elbow pad right here. These buttons were 3D printed. Couldn't find any size at the hardware store that would fit this, and they're, I think it's called camphor in a certain way. So I 3D modeled that and then I printed them out. This is actually how they look like. And then I just sanded them down and then painted them. After that, this piece right here was constructed with 6mm, 4mm, and that looks to be a hex nut. So I made a hex nut out of foam and then I just stuck it on. It's also curved, so I made this foam piece with a pattern that had a curve on here to create that roundedness. Going into the lower part and attaching this round elbow piece to the, I guess the forearm piece was a little tricky because I didn't really know how it functioned. It looked like it was one piece, so here you can see there's a gap because I just contact cemented that onto this. But I think what I will do next time is I will attach nylon webbing instead to the back end of this. That allows it to have some sort of flex right here, so it attaches not through a physical contact with that bottom piece, but instead it's going to be connected through this strapping method, which allows it some ability to move. Moving on from there, we're gonna go into these forearm piece. So these are just 4 pieces of foam. So this base piece, which has the buckle inserts, is a 4mm, and then all of the details you see right here, you see the first 2 ridges, that's the first 2 foam layers, and then there's the red foam piece with all the Norse inscription. Those are 2mm foam. All of these were designed and laser cut, so those are little holes. I actually measured them out to scale according to Steph's body size, and I think they are M3 or M4 size bolts or nuts. So if you guys want, you guys can go ahead and use the actual nuts and bolts. Move on to the top piece where you see all of these inscriptions. I want to make it as accurate as possible to the game. So according to what we found with the 4K trailer as well as the poster shot of Tifa, Steph took those letters and actually transcribed them into the English alphabet, and then I took those English alphabet, downloaded a Norse font, and then converted it over. We did that, we put it along the trim. So that was tricky, that took a long time, but I'm glad I did that because now it looks it looks great. I liked it. And then these are also small little pieces you'll see right here. Those are actually rhinestones that Steph ordered off Amazon. The foam piece had little cutouts, so we made the rhinestones fit inside here and we just super glued them on. Before I go down any further, these right here are just 1/2-inch magnets, so we just super glued them on. They worked well. According to the reference photos we had, we couldn't tell what it was, but I knew they were some sort of metallic bolts or screws, so I just went ahead and used this for right now. And then, same thing, we went all the way down. Same type of procedure. We got the whole thing to put together. So you're probably wondering next what is it's going to be the straps. So these were cut out. The original straps that Steph had wanted was 1-inch strap, but from wearing it, I think they were a little too big, so the design we implemented now is for a 3/4 of an inch. So it's a little thinner than this, so they're not as bulky, but we went ahead for this one. These are 1-inch straps on the back, and you'll see we have an acrylic sheet that's also cut out and super glued into this place. That way the belts don't rip through the thin sheets of foam. So we have that on all 6 of these, and then Steph just sewed these belts together and then attached the buckle to them. That's how you made it.
So for Tifa's gloves, if you take a look at them super close up, especially in the scene where she's sort of messing a little bit with her glass when she's talking to Cloud, there is a cut along the side of the hand and also the front of the palm. And I have a pre-existing fingerless glove pattern, again for my Aqua cosplay, that I based my design off of, and I'll put some progress photos here so you can see kind of what I was thinking of. But essentially the glove was divided into 3 parts. It had the front portion and the back portion and then the side portion. And the side portion was super weird because it was essentially just a funky little rectangle with a teardrop shape cut out of it, and that was where my thumb was going to go. And then the thumb portion itself was one piece, so that was really interesting. The first thing that I I did for them is that I hemmed the edges of the fingertips for the fingerless gloves, at least the majority portion of it, and then I set to work on the thumb. For the thumb portion, I sewed together the thumb sleeve for it first and then attached it to the portion of the base glove that it was supposed to be a part of, and then I attached that part to the rest of the glove. It wasn't anything too particularly difficult, just a little bit tedious because I was rearranging the glove, which I have right here. The bottoms I just sort of left a little bit open, and it is something that I do need to go back and probably hem. Overall, I made the gloves a little loose because the fabric was quite stretchy, but I don't think they're so terribly loose that it looks awful, but that is the base glove.
So now we're going to talk about the glove details. What you can see here, all of the details, and those are actually engraved on, and same with that's just engraved on. All of these are scored and engraved on too. So we made those. And the thumb, the bottom piece has the threading trim, but this top piece doesn't, versus here, this plate has it. These knuckle pieces have the trim. The trick here with these is that this looks like it's actually sitting on the knuckles, but in reality, if you were to do that for your gloves and you were to make a fist, these would all be out of position because your knuckles would push them out. So these actually sit below the knuckles right here. I made them a lot smaller than I had anticipated, and they worked out really, really well. These have a curve to it, so we just bent them and then we super glued them on. That's it for these gloves.
So for Tifa's chain bracelet and the charms on it, the two things that are really obvious are that Tifa's chain bracelets are composed of 3 chains, and on her left hand she has a chocobo, and on her right hand she has a bomb. I feel like those are the most obvious details when it comes to Tifa's bracelets, but there are little things that people don't really notice. So starting with her left bracelet, this is how my little chocobo dude survived Anime Expo. Unfortunately, both of his little legs got popped off, which is understandable because he is quite tiny, as you can see here. This was modeled by my friend Jamie, and it is something that eventually I want to start offering in mine and Lawrence's Etsy shop. It was printed with an SLA printer or a resin printer. The way that I painted these little charms was that I primed them with 2 to 4 coats of Plastidip, and then I gave it, I think, about 2 coats of silver paint, and then I diluted some black acrylic paint and then just dipped the charms in and then sort of brushed with water any parts that I felt were a little too saturated with black, and then I just let them dry. Then I came in later with a little bit of silver paint to do any touch-ups in case the wash didn't go the way that I wanted it to, but that's more or less how I was able to paint the charms. Her left bracelet is the simplest one because it just has the chocobo charm, but her right bracelet, I believe, has 3 charms on it, but I can't make out what the 3rd charm is. I am fairly certain it is on her bracelet because, as you can see in this image here, it does look like it's dangling. The closest thing that I could think that it could be is a skull, but it does have that weird cutout at the top of the head that confuses me a lot, and I don't know what it could possibly be other than that. So if you have any idea what that could be, let me know in the comments down below. It's been driving me nuts. Other than that, the other 2 charms on the right bracelet of hers are this little bomb guy as well as a little feather. So these details here, again, the bomb was modeled by my friend Jamie, and the feather charm was actually gifted to me by her, but just like the chocobo, the same paint job was applied to the little bomb. There are loops that were designed on top of the charm in case you didn't catch that, just so that you can attach them to your bracelet. Next up is this interesting, strange little metal bangle bracelet band thing that Tifa wears around her wrist. It's a little hard to see the details. This was a tiny piece that I rushed for mine, so this is how mine turns out. I was originally contemplating painting black acrylic along the aluminum here and then scratching off the edges to get a similar texture, but decided I did not care enough to do that. But the way that this one is constructed is that we had purchased some flat aluminum wire, which is what this is, and then just super glued it onto 2mm foam. So interestingly, it is fairly flexible, which is pretty good, even though it is attached using super glue, so that's really interesting. So these are really easy to put on and put off. You could just adjust them to your wrist. They're not entirely accurate because they don't have as much of a raise on the lip as her actual bracelets do, but they are good enough for me for now. But next up will be her materia band, which she wears on her right wrist.
Okay, so now let's do the Materia slot. You saw in the trailer she had this power wrist bracelet thing, but it had just 2 slots for her Materia. Steph found a silicone mold of a round object, I guess. These bracelets were basically made out of 4mm foam, so you can see the details. And originally we were going to make all the filigrees you see here and the trim out of 2mm and then glue it on top of 4mm. But I was thinking that would have been too thick. What we did instead was I designed it with the trim and the filigree already on the 4mm, and then we just engraved everything out of it. So all of this black you see here, it's burnt down, leaving the trim and the filigree raised. Similar concept to this. This is a 2mm piece of foam. We had the little details of that red marble circle piece that goes right here, and that sits on top of this piece. So you see there's a 4mm goes here, and then the 2mm kind of goes around it. It's not a full strap like I think the game intended or designed it to be, so we just made it look kind of like that. And then on the back we have the exact same design without the 2 slots. So these are the same piece. This just doesn't have the slot. Still has the little detail that's included right there. And then the trick was to figure out how to make this fitted without showing some sort of Velcro or strapping technique. So we went ahead and made the inner tubing piece, which is also in the reference photos, out of a 6mm piece of foam, and we wrapped it with the same sheet of fabric that Steph used to make her glove to make it look at least somewhat uniform. And then we just super glued this strapping, the bracelet, on top of it. So I didn't take into account that this piece was going to be this big, so that's why there's this gap right here. So if I was going to redesign this again, which we might do, I'm going to take into account of this extra, I guess, girth and make this design slightly bigger just so that it would be flush like this end over here. This is cool because it allows flexibility, which allows Steph to slide her hand into it and slide it out. So that's how we made the right wristband.
As for the materia itself that Tifa does wear on her materia band, which I have right here, she does have 1 piece of materia in the slot for the majority of the trailer. The materia is located on the left slot, so it would be, when you're wearing it, the slot closest to your body, I suppose, facing inward, not outward. Later on, towards the tail end of the trailer, it does appear that she gains a second materia to fill that second slot. A lot of people at Anime Expo were asking me if I was missing materia, but Tifa canonically only has 1 command materia at the beginning portion of the trailer, but does gain her second green materia towards the ending. Next is when we start getting into the nitty-gritty details of everything I've been hyper-analyzing for Tifa, starting with her suspenders and the shoulder pad set. I decided to make everything attached, so my suspender set is connected into the skirt. First, we will be talking about the suspender set along with the shoulder pads. For the sake of time, I decided to make her shoulder pads by reusing part of this back brace that I had gotten off of Amazon and just wrapping it. I went to Joann Fabrics and purchased duck cloth. To my understanding, starting from, I guess, the back and at the bottom and moving our way to the front, the back is the most nebulous portion of Tifa because it's mostly hidden by her hair, but you can see through a couple of these reference shots here, there does appear to be some sort of armor thing at the back at the intersection of her suspenders. Because there are 0 absolutely clear shots to even understand what the heck is happening back there, I just opted for making it up because in real life my hair would also be covering this portion, so it didn't matter too much. So every portion of the bottom of Tifa's suspenders has this interesting black tab here, and then at the parts where the suspenders connect to the rest of the belt, she has this interesting buckle that just sort of hangs out but still has fabric and all these lines, which I thought was a little weird, so I just opted to put these rings here. Her suspender belts themselves are brown, so that's why we have this guy here, and then I opted to put a little bit of elastic because I thought it'd be fun, but I don't think I like it, so I will be taking it out. But this gets sandwiched into the shoulder pads here, which has this fun little Y back that I created, and I put my sewing machine through hell. But that is the back portion of it. This is the little pocket that theoretically would have the rest of the suspender going through it, I believe, and connecting, because this is supposed to be some sort of armor plate, I'm pretty sure. But going to the front, where we can see more of the suspenders, This is the suspender belt that I was talking about that would theoretically come out through the top here, but I just faked it out because I can. There is this weird top decorative belt with this fun little piece of hardware here. This thing is called a ladder lock buckle, and it is some funky, weird, military grade thing that was almost impossible to track down, but you don't have to worry about figuring out what it's called or where to get it because there's the link in the description just for you. I got it in the color black, and I spray painted it gunmetal because I didn't want it to be exactly black because it does have some sort of silvery texture to it. We have the 3 detail lines right here. I believe they're about 1/8 of an inch away from each other. Then we have this interesting loose band here that covers over this super miscellaneous and random rectangle buckle that has a little loop here. And then we also have the stud detail right here. So breaking this portion down more specifically, when I was looking at how Tifa's shoulder pad suspender portion was looking, I really got the impression that the weight of this was very thin, like extremely thin. So this pleather material I think is a faux leather. I have it listed in the description like everything else I've been mentioning, but this one was used in a lot of detail pieces when we get to the skirt, and I also used it up here. The way that I had constructed this was that I had taken 2 pieces of the fabric, and instead of sewing it inside out, I hemmed it and then sandwiched them together to get this interesting effect here that hopefully you can see. And the benefit of doing this is that I feel like it has that sort of loose, almost soft texture, even though it's clearly leather. And it also has the added benefit of sandwiching the leather of the suspender right here, which you can see here. So that's the back, front, and the leather is sandwiched between it. So that is how I did that. Moving on to the suspender belt itself. This is the one thing that I have that is, I know for sure, inaccurate, but I will be going back and fixing. But this is 2 pieces of a brown leather vinyl fabric that were just sewn on top of each other, and the edges were left raw because if you look at how Tifa's suspenders look like, they have that raw edge finish to them. This is the belt buckle, which is separated and it does actually unbuckle. So you can separate these. So the bottom portion is different from the top portion. But there are little details that I did not get on the buckle portion down here. To be more specific about it, it does appear that there is a random rectangle ring inserted in here that the fabric does loop around before continuing up to the buckle itself. This is a detail that is only visible on the side of Tifa, as you can see here, because it's not visible head on because the top portion of the belt covers it. And additionally, there also appears to be a belt loop that she doesn't even use that is also located near the rectangle ring. So fun fact. And just like the back, we have this fun little rectangle ring here, and then this loops on here, which brings us now to the skirt. So this is how mine looks like. We will be breaking it down from front to back. And first we'll talk about her belt, I suppose. So for Tifa's belt, she has a 2-inch parachute buckle in the front, which I have right here. I have to remake this skirt because there were some miscalculations, but she also has a little stud right here, and that is how the fabric gets looped over, but I believe I also sewed it down for extra security. This is the same detail fabric that was used in her shoulders as well. The way the belt was constructed was by cutting out a long strip of 2mm EVA foam, then using Loctite 200 to spray onto the EVA foam as well as the back of the faux leather that I was using, pressing them together and then stitching it down with my sewing machine. The belt wraps all the way around, and there are some belt loops in place that I included in this outfit. Said belt loops you can find right here next to these fun little suspender loops, because when you look at Tifa's picture, they have these interesting little triangles on the side of these, so I figured, hey, those are probably belt loops. It makes sense. Interestingly, her belt disappears on the side where she has her little pouch flaps. So that's something to note. This does sink underneath the pouch flap. That does flip over. We'll be going over that little detail in a little bit. Her back does have something kind of strange going on because she has these 2 bits, as you can see here. I don't really know how that works in the physical world, but it is surely something cosmetic that I will be adding in the future. Now, moving on to the front of the skirt itself, this is how mine looks. To break it down a little bit more easily, the front portion is a 4 pleated skirt. Because the faux leather is such a soft material, I sewed down the edges of the pleat here as well as on the inside, so you can see they have lines here. This helps hold the pleats in place. And then we have skull studs added to the bottom here. There are in total 3 skull studs added to the bottom of the skirt. And I have a link for those in the description down below. For the top portion of her skirt, this is a piece that is in between the waistband and at the top of the pleats themselves. So this piece right here, if you cross compare with some screenshots, does seem to have an interesting different sort of leather texture. So it is the same texture that is her belt as well as her shoulder pads to keep consistency across her outfit. But it does appear to be some sort of interesting decorative piece that kind of goes up and then back down and stretches all the way around and repeats on this side as well. She also has a skull and crossbow stud that sits on both sides. Interestingly, at the bottom of the piece, she also has this interesting metallic looking detail here, and it goes straight before flaring a little bit out at the bottom. I figured that the closest thing that it looked like at this point in time, because I could not find any metallic beading that looked similar, was a zipper. So I took a separating zipper and then just attached it to this portion right here, and I feel like it works fairly well. The only downside of using a zipper is that because it's a zipper, it's a little bit stiff, so I did have to cut some triangles out in order to make it bend a little bit better around the curve. I think I'm actually going to start on the back of her skirt because it is the simplest part of her skirt, and then we will talk about the sides. So the back of the skirt does not have anything super complex going along with it. It just has this center back seam down here, and it does have this interesting detail towards the bottom. This, similar to the front of the skirt, does appear to be made out of some sort of different texture, so I did top stitch this on. But other than that, there is nothing too special about the back. And where things start getting a little crazy are the sides of her skirt. So the way that I decoded it is that she has this interesting other flap that overlaps on top of her belt and also extends a little bit longer, because from this side portion all the way back around creates this interesting little cape thing. So if you look at her skirt, you can see right here I did include a bit of a size difference here. It does extend and hang a little bit on both sides of her skirt. It does not, however, cover any portion of the skirt. You can tell that it is all interconnected, which is super funky. Instead of being an overflap that covers more of, for example, a pleated section or more of a mini skirt looking section such as the back, it is a part of the skirt itself, and you can tell because of the way that the skirt is animated in all of these little screenshots that I'm providing right over here. As you can see, when Tifa crouches, that part of the skirt stretches along with the rest of the skirt, suggesting that it is one whole piece and there isn't actually any sort of understructure. Thus, I sewed it together. Moving from the top down, she has this strange belt looking portion up here with 4 studs. This seems to coincide with where the belt would be a little bit, but it is significantly thinner. I will provide a photo here of the progress shot of the skirt without all these belts in a way so you can have a better idea of how the skirt structure looks like. I implemented these little rectangular holes here because that's where the belts were going to be popping off of, and those belts were going to be looped on top of the big waist belt that goes all the way around. So if I show you on the skirt here, you can see I created, in a sense, pseudo belt loops on the side of the rectangle cutout that I demonstrated earlier, and then we have this belt right here. There we go, we can up the brightness. But you can see that this belt right here that goes along her waistband is actually hooked around the waist belt here to ensure that it stays. And then on the sides of the rectangle design that I had in this image that I will probably show here, it acted as a way to secure these belts so that they would not move. So this is something that's located on the front and back, or I guess on both sides of the pouch, which is really interesting. Moving on to the lower portion of the skirt, she does have pouches. This is something that I feel like a lot of people have picked up on. So because my fabric is flimsy and doesn't have any interfacing, it sort of hangs like this. But a detail that people haven't really picked up on is that she has this pattern here, like that looks like this. But it's fairly visible throughout multiple points in the trailer, and especially when they show her back shot, you can see that there is actually a continuation from the back of the skirt all the way up, and it does seem to suggest that it goes onto the skirt itself. So she has this pattern, and it's on both sides of the skirt, and then she has the pouch itself right here. It's very thin, so I think it's about an inch, half an inch right here on the side, and then this was hand sewed down onto the skirt itself. This is a fairly simple design here too. There are no designs on top of it or anything. It just has this top stitching on the sides to match everything else that is going along the back. Last but not least, the belt details for her skirt, which are one of the most chaotic pieces ever. So her skirt gets the most confusing around here, honestly, and there's still parts of it that I don't entirely understand because the reference photos that I took confuse me. But to my understanding, the skirt is divided into 2 belts on each side of the pouches for a total of 8 belts. This top belt right here, and then this bottom belt here. That is the super duper long one. They sit on top of each other. The construction of them was a little bit complicated, but I essentially made it so that both pieces would connect. This longer one on the bottom, it's sort of like this hand was the top belt, sits and cups the belt that goes around the waist from the back, and then the longer belt sits on top of that, and then I just sew the edges on the top and the bottom, and the little gap there is what I slid the belt through to create that little belt loop, if that makes any sense at all, hopefully. And then we have the short little belt on top, which has this tri-glide right here. All this hardware is going to be listed in the description like everything else. And then we have these fun little swivel hooks. So the swivel hooks are really interesting because there are a lot of swivel hooks out there, but the primary features of the swivel hook appear to be that it does have a more rectangular bar here than a circle one. In some photos, they look completely straight because it's a swivel hook, and when looking at it from the side, here's a reference photo for comparison. Last but not least, for her skirt, the longer, more complex belt here. This long piece here meets a rectangle ring, interestingly. Then it has a bit of a chunk here. Then it seems to loop into a tri-glide again. And then interestingly, in the reference photos, there appears to be something on the center of the tri-glide, and then at the bottom does appear to be more of these fun ladder lock buckles. Again, this is something that covers each side of the pouch. So in total, it's fairly heavy and bulky. That is it for the monster of a skirt. I feel like this is probably something that most people are going to be interested in, but moving on onto more simpler versions of her outfit, she has the shorts underneath her outfit, which I just use biking shorts that I had laying around. I can include a link in the description down below to some other shorts that you can buy off of Amazon if you would like. Her thigh-high socks are, for me, I just own thigh-high socks. Anyhow, moving on to the final topic, which are Tifa's shoes. Her shoes do not have a heel, they are flat boots. The soles on the shoes do appear to be a little thick and reminiscent of her original character design. She does appear to have metal plating on her shoes. The only difference is that this time they seem to be relegated only to her soles, and they appear to be on both of her shoes. They appear to sort of cup the shoe by encircling the front of the shoe as well as the back of the shoe, but not entirely. There are little gaps on the side. Moving to the shoe themselves, you can see a little bit in this photo right here that there does appear to be shoelaces on it, on top of this strange little belt thing we have going on here. They do appear to have a bit of a flare around her ankle to the point where you can see inside of the shoe, and the interior of the shoe does have a white design. As for the belt buckle thing that wraps around the boot itself, it does appear to have a lot of these interesting little belt loop things. These pseudo belt loop things do look like they're actually attached to her boots. There does appear to be 3 in total, 2 sort of at an angle on her foot and then 1 directly behind her heel. The front portion of the belt itself does seem to be this red rectangle with the silver rectangle trim. These are all the reference photos I have for it. So that is everything covering Tifa's outfit from head to toe. So hopefully this is useful if you want to do a Tifa cosplay. I know that the amount of content that we have to work with right now isn't much. If you did find this useful, I would very much appreciate if you could let me know by commenting, liking, subscribing. Let me know if there's anything else you noticed or thought in the comments down below. I would love to hear if there's anything you didn't know about that you think is useful. Pretty sure I covered just about everything. So thank you so much for watching. Hope this video was useful, and I will catch you next time.